Back in 2017, the state of Uttar Pradesh in India introduced a new law called the Uttar Pradesh Board of Madarsa Education Act. This law was a big step towards changing how madrasas, which are Islamic religious schools, are run. These schools have always been a big part of how Muslims in India get their education. This law wanted to bring some rules and regulations to madrasas. You see, these schools mostly focused on religious teachings, like studying the Quran, the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, and Islamic law. The Act wanted to bring changes to what was being taught in these schools and how they were managed. It said that along with religious teachings, madrasas also had to start teaching subjects like math, science, and social studies. One of the main goals was to include these modern subjects in the traditional Islamic curriculum. The idea was that this would give students a more well-rounded education, preparing them for the challenges of a world that's constantly changing. The Uttar Pradesh government said these changes were needed to make the education in madrasas better. They believed that by learning these modern subjects, students would have a better chance of going for higher studies and getting good jobs. They felt that students graduating from these schools should have the skills and knowledge needed to do well in today's job market. This was seen as an important step in bridging the gap between what's taught in these religious schools and what's needed in today's world. The Act also wanted to standardize how madrasas are run, making them more accountable and transparent. This meant making sure they kept proper records, had regular checks, and followed the educational standards set by the state. However, this act was met with mixed reactions. Some people thought it was a good step towards modernizing education, while others were worried about what it could mean for their religious traditions and freedom. Some people welcomed the move, but others were suspicious and concerned. Critics argued that the government's involvement could weaken the religious and cultural identity of madrasas, which have always had a certain level of independence. This difference of opinion came about because the issue was very sensitive, as it involved religious freedom and the right to education. The debate highlighted the difficulty of finding a balance between government regulations and respect for religious institutions. The introduction of this act sparked a big conversation about madrasa education in India. It brought up important questions about the role of education in a society's progress and how to preserve cultural heritage. It made people think about the balance between religious freedom, the right to education, and the government's role in overseeing religious schools. As the act continues to be put into action, only time will tell how it will impact madrasa education and the overall educational landscape in Uttar Pradesh. Right after the Uttar Pradesh Board of Madarsa Education Act was passed, it faced legal challenges. Many people saw this act, which aimed to modernize madrasas by including subjects like science and math, as a direct interference in their religious education. Several people and groups went to court and filed petitions, arguing that this act went against their freedom of religion. They believed that the government wasn't just trying to reform education, but was trying to control their religious rights. They argued that the government trying to decide what's taught in madrasas was like interfering in their religious practices. They stressed that madrasas have always been places of religious learning, and any outside pressure could weaken their religious core. The petitioners argued that madrasas, being religious institutions, should have the freedom to choose their own curriculum. They emphasized that the heart of madrasa education lies in its religious teachings, which should not be touched by government policies. They emphasized that religious education was at the core of their faith, and that the government should not interfere in how religion is taught. They also pointed out that religious leaders and scholars are the most qualified to design the curriculum for madrasas. They also raised practical concerns about putting this act into practice, like finding qualified teachers to teach these modern subjects. They questioned if the government had enough resources and support to make such a big change in education. These legal challenges highlighted how complex it is to make rules for religious institutions. The debate wasn't just about education, but also about the larger issues of religious freedom and government intervention. The case brought to light the tension between the government's duty to provide good education for everyone and the need to protect religious freedom, a right guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. It emphasized the delicate balance that needs to be maintained between these two fundamental principles. The case eventually went to the Supreme Court of India, the highest court in the country. This showed how important and complex the issues were. Everyone was waiting to hear what the Supreme Court would say about the Uttar Pradesh Board of Madarsa Education Act. Legal experts, teachers, religious leaders, and the public were all eagerly waiting for the decision. The case had caught the attention of the whole country, with many eager to see how the court would balance the different interests involved. The outcome would affect not just madrasas in Uttar Pradesh, but could also set an example for how religious education is regulated throughout India. The Supreme Court of India, after listening to arguments from both sides, gave its much-awaited decision on the Uttar Pradesh Board of Madarsa Education Act. This case had everyone's attention because it dealt with the connection between religious freedom and educational standards. The court decided that the act was valid, saying it didn't go against the right to religious freedom that's written in our Constitution. The judges carefully considered all the arguments, thinking about the importance of religious teaching as well as the need for a well-rounded education. In its explanation, the court said that education is very important in today's world. It said that education is not just about gaining knowledge, but a basic right that helps people contribute to society. The court recognized that while madrasas have the right to teach religion, they also have a responsibility to provide their students with a complete education. This includes not just religious teachings, but also subjects that are important for personal and professional growth in the modern world. The court clearly stated that getting a good education, including subjects like science, math, and technology, was crucial for the overall development of individuals. This well-rounded approach to education is important for them to be a part of society. The court also agreed that the government has a right to regulate educational institutions to make sure they are maintaining good quality and standards. This oversight is needed to guarantee that all students are getting an education that prepares them for the future. However, the court also said that the act should be implemented carefully and with sensitivity. It said that it's important to respect the cultural and religious feelings of the communities involved. It stressed the need for continued dialogue and discussion with all stakeholders, including madrasa authorities, teachers, and members of the Muslim community. This collaborative approach is important to ensure that the act is implemented effectively and without any conflict. The court's observations aim to find a balance between upholding the right to religious freedom and ensuring that all students receive a good education. This balance is crucial for a society that is inclusive and progressive. The Supreme Court's ruling on the Uttar Pradesh Board of Madarsa Education Act set an important example for how religious schools can be regulated in India. It acts as a guide for future cases where the right to religious freedom and the need for quality education overlap.